Week 10, Session 2, Post-Fordism in its micro dimensions. In this session, we look into the micro-political dimensions of the dissolution of the Fordist factory and the rise of post-Fordism. Susan Thistle analyzes the dual process of post-Fordism. On the one hand, the shift of gravity from the manufacturing to the service sector has entailed, quote, the movement of the U.S. economy westward and overseas, where the development of new geographical regions brought financial gains. It is in this movement that the U.S. manufacturing sector has dissolved itself through the export processing zones, outsourcing, or subcontracting. On the other hand, the U.S. domestic economy has created its own zones of sourcing or externality by converting the domestic work into market activities and through the exponential growth of women's participation in the workforce. Thistle further breaks down the latter into two seemingly contradictory trends. First, the domestic chores that were traditionally done by women under the Fordist factory paradigm became a new source of lucrative business. The 2/5 of the job increase since 1970s is in the field of domestic work. By 1990s, more workers are employed in this field than in all of manufacturing in the United States. The growth of the fast food industry has replaced the domestic work for food preparation. By the 1990s, the food preparation done outside household doubled. It is also reflected in the fact that the grocery chains have come to incorporate ready-made food. The cleaning service that had supplemented women's work, run by a number of small family businesses in the 1950s, were taken over by large corporations in the 1960s and 70s. By the mid-1990s, the domestic cleaning service became a $2 billion a year business. The biggest growth in the conversion of the domestic work into wage work is the day-to-day home health care and emotional labor. This field of home health care, elderly and child care, has grown 6 times the rate of manufacturing positions. The other side of the marketization of the domestic work is a massive entry of women into the skilled labor force in professional, managerial, and technical positions. Women's entry into the skilled labor force was based on their pursuit of education and training. By the year 2000, more than 40% of medical, law, and doctoral degrees had gone to women. And yet, half of all women in the United States are still trapped in low-wage service sector jobs. 9/10 of the domestic service industry are dominated by women. The new workers in the low-paid service sectors in the 1990s were almost entirely unmarried women with a high school education or less. With the dissolution of the Fordist factory, where men's support for women's tasks at home had all but disappeared, women turned to wages to meet the basic needs. Combined with the unmarried women's exodus from their dependency on fathers' and brothers' income, women generally have moved away from dependency on men for their livelihood. On the surface level, women's exodus from the Fordist nuclear family seems to support women's movement's goal, that is, independence from patriarchy. In actuality, however, women are now exposed to the macro-political power of the market and employers instead of the micro-political power of patriarchy. As Thistle demonstrates, the impact of this new regime of power on women varies according to the educational level. College graduate women have foregone or delayed marriage and motherhood in favor of their participation in the skilled labor force. The most recent trend, however, shows that they are trying to combine family and their pursuit of career, which results in the overwork and exhaustions. High school graduates and those who did not complete the college education have encountered tremendous challenges from juggling between their low paying and less stable jobs and their domestic role. Compared to the women with high education, they are less rewarded for their enormous workload, both at home and work, without the traditional support for their domestic tasks. High school dropouts are faced with unemployment and motherhood without support, which is prevalent among African American women. Their jobs, if any, tend to be in the low-paying service sector. Finally, the author notes that the breakdown of domestic economy and women's turn for wage work had different impacts according to race. African American women work longer hours than white women and experience unemployment 3 times higher than white women. They are twice as likely as white women to be in the low-paying jobs. In conclusion, the dissolution of the Fordist nuclear family has not translated itself into the disappearance of the domestic work or women's liberation from such work. In the worst-case scenario, women are still forced to engage in the domestic work without the support from the family or from the state.